Hello, 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 guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we've got part 193, inching that little bit closer to the big 200 for our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. Where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment. We've got a couple small mammals. We've got some a cool exhibit animal. We've also got some really cool small mammals and a couple extinct ones too. And they all overlap a little bit too. So we're going to get started with Tosco DS. Tosco DS always makes some really, really awesome exhibit mods, and they have not failed us again. We've got here the sea bunny slug. So let's have a look at these guys. They come in a variety of different colors that we'll go through. So this is Genura parva, commonly known as the sea bunny. These guys are a species of nudibranch, which are a type of marine gastropod mollusks. So basically they're like a slug. And they're first described by Kiroto Baba, and the resemblance of it looking like a rabbit, you can see with the little hand there, it looks almost like a little bunny rabbit, and then there's fuzz on it. Caused them to surge in popularity in 2015, so you kind of see that's a very cute look to it, as you can kind of see there. Another white one, here's a orange one. We'll keep around having a look. So this is a species that gets about 2.5 centimeters long, and there's black and white rhinophores. As you can see, they kind of resemble bunny ears, where it gets its name. Its external gills are located near the rear, and its body is covered in what's called papillae, which are fleshy protuberances that are used for sensory functions, so they're able to use the feel and around the environment. But it kind of gives them the appeal of like they're furry, which is kind of like hair, which also been accentuated in here a little bit. So let's have a look at this one here. There are multiple colorations that we're kind of going through here of this species, including yellow, white, and green, though the latter is really photographed. And all these versions have black papillae interspent among their papillae on their main body. And there is controversy whether these are actually different species or just colour morphs of the same one. So that's a little quite interesting there. I don't see anything in there. Is the invisible? Must be. The yellow one. Must be it. That must be the green one, because we had a green one here. Looks like it. Like other members of its genus, Genura parva's diet consists of actually toxic sponges in the family Chelonidae. However, they're also known to eat algae, sea grasses, and other small creatures such as sea slugs or sea snails. The sponges makes up a large percentage of their diet and is actually subject to scientific study. As the sea bunny feeds on these highly toxic sea sponges, they actually steal the toxins and utilize them in their own defenses. So they store the toxins they acquire from the sponges in their skin and rods, and when they feel threatened, they will discharge these cells, which sting any potential predator. And these sponges contain toxins that have been used for cancer treatment. So that's quite a little thing to learn about. And like other species of gastropods and snails and slugs and things, they are hermaphrodites, which mean they both produce sperm and egg cells, but they cannot fertilize their own eggs, so they have to go and find another one to fertilize them. But in terms of distribution, this species was described from the Kili province in Japan, but they have been reported in the Philippines, Tanzania, Papua New Guinea, the Seychelles, and Reunion, where there's some doubts on whether it's all one species or potentially this is a species complex. These species are concentrated in areas where there is an abundance of food and where resources are easily acquired, and they often cling to submerged vegetation and spend the majority of their time at the bottom of tropical waters. That's where you typically find them. So let's have a little bit look at the Zoopedia, see what else we can find them. So you can see quite a wide range there. 1 to 5, let's see, in the Pacific, they're called rhinophores, these are detect chemicals, that's true. They will not only see colour, only detect light and shadows, and sea bunnies stand out amongst most nudibranchs of the cute semblance and white rabbits and make them popular. Yeah, that's kind of what we would go through. And they don't like enrichment with anyone, even though it says they can. Yeah, that's quite cool. I actually want to see if we can find Does we have a yellow one? I mean a green one. I want to see him. Where is he? Animal camera. See there, that's the green one there. Interesting. Cool, yeah. So that is by Tosco DS, another really cool one there sorted. So next up, we're going to have a look at the Surf Scooter, done by Lorby. A couple species of sea duck that were going on as well. We've got one coming up first. We've got the Surf Scooter. Let's have a look at these cool guys here. So the Surf Scooter, or Melantina perspicilla, is a large species of sea duck from North America. And in terms of their taxonomy, they've got, they were first just kind of described in 1750 as well. And they placed them in the same genus as ducks and geese and annis, but they were originally, did put in their own genus of Melantina, which kind of meant just black duck. And then perstialis means kind of spectacled, in turn derived from perspicilla, which means see-through. So there are monotypic clade, or there's only one species in that genus as well, but they are, in this as well. So there's no subspecies, and they are closest to the white-winged scooter and the velvet scooter, which are considered sister taxon, and they come from this subgenus Melantina, which should be their full genus as well. And within the other ones and the other scooters, but it's kind of confusing. And they're part of the group, the Merididae tribe, which includes things like Eiders, Messengers, golden eyes, and other sea ducks, which is, and then in term, they're a type of duck along with swans and geese. So they are very interesting. So the surf scooter kind of reaches sexual maturity at about 3 years of age, and the adult male is on average just over a kilogram, or 1,050 grams, or about 2.3 pounds, and 48 centimeters in length. Well, the average female is about 900 grams, or 2 pounds, and about 44 centimeters, or 17 inches in length. And it makes them the smallest species of scooter on average, which is interesting as well. And they have a wingspan of about 29.9 to 30.3 centimeters, or about 76 to 77 centimeters. So you can see the male here is pretty much completely velvet black, except for the white patches on the forehead and the nape. It has a swollen bill that appears orange from distance, but is patterned with white, yellow, and red, and a black spot near the base. The female, you can see, is much browner than the males. Looks pretty, typical of ducks. The female tends to be the dull one, with a fairly uniform pattern, but slightly darker above than below. There are incident paler patches present on the cheeks, and sometimes there's a white patch on the nape, which is a unique trait amongst the scooters, which is interesting as well. And the juveniles have plumage quite similar to the female, just a bit paler and browner, and the breast and belly are whitish. So we'll go into that soon. These guys are quite easily distinguishable from other species of scooter by the white patch on their head and the unique bill pattern, with females and immatures having bulkier beaks with a Scottish base than other scooters. That's another way to tell about them. And like all sea ducks, they actually become flightless during the simultaneous molt of its flight feathers, and this vulnerable period happens around late July to early August and lasts about 4 weeks. The wing molt is the start of the complete body or pre-basic molt, which is completed in the fall, and the next basic or breeding plumage. Before the pre-basic molt, many duck species undergo a pre-alternative molt, which replaces the bright colours of the basic plumage in the males with duller appearance of an eclipse plumage, which is kind of called there. And the plumage is actually quite a good indicator for the age of males, but not females. The second-year males are similar to adults, but may have brownish feathers or lack their white head patch. And in terms of vocalizations, they're generally silent, and few vocalizations are actually known, but males will have a gurgling call and a puck-puck call, and alarmed as well, which is quite interesting. So compared to most Northern American ducks, or sea ducks, these guys breed exclusively in North America. They're mainly found in northern Canada and Alaska, and then they take different migration routes to spend winter in more temperate environments. So while small numbers regularly winter in Western Europe as far south as the British Isles, the vast majority of these species along the Pacific are found winter along the Pacific and Atlantic coast of North America, with the Pacific coast hosting the highest number of individuals, and the large wintering area extends over 5,000 kilometers from the Aleutian Islands to Baja Peninsula in Mexico. So quite a wide range. The migratory species breeds in boreal forests near northern freshwater lakes. Very few nests have been observed, but they tend to be near spruce cover, slightly upland to wetland areas, and to complete its molt before migration, they travel to a molting site, which is different from a wintering or a nesting site, and because of the vulnerable states of these ducks, they have to have prolific food and lower risk of predation than they're located in typically bays, inlets, or estuaries, and they typically winter in marine habitats near the shore. In terms of migration, many migration routes have been observed, but the route choice for this surf scooter will depend on latitude and nesting site. The departure date will also may vary depending on their wintering site, but the date of arrival seems to be almost synchronous. This suggests there are different factors such as weathers or favourable conditions that kind of encourage them to move up. These ducks face very difficult environmental conditions depending on their location of the wintering grounds, and it affects their migratory behaviour. So high portions of males are located in northern parts, while more females and juveniles in winter in the southernmost parts of that range. So typically males tend to be a little bit north and females tend to be a little bit more south. In spring, males and females migrate together to their breeding areas and usually settle in their nesting areas, usually less than a week after arriving. In terms of breeding, though, they do form pairs, as we mentioned, in the wintering grounds and staging grounds. Most pairs are formed before the arrival on the breeding ground, with studies showing a strong site fidelity for nesting areas for these species over the years. The building of the nest usually starts in mid-May to early June, and it occurs on the ground close to the sea, lakes and rivers, and in woodland or tundra. Females dig a bowl-shaped nest in the ground and lines it with nearby ground debris and down, so kind of their feathers. About 5 to 9 eggs are laid, and each may range from 55 to 79 grams, or 1.9 to 2.8 ounces, which is interesting as well. And the incubation lasts about 28 to 30 days and is provided by the female only. Occasional and likely accidental brood mixing between different females occurs in areas with high density, and hatching is synchronous among the eggs. The females also typically choose a feeding area less than 2 meters deep and protected from strong winds for its offspring. And when they reach these food-rich wetlands, they begin feeding on their own, and the mother abandons them its young before they reach their flight age at about 55 days. The fledged offspring congregate in small groups on the breeding area before migrating to the wintering grounds independently of the adults. Studies in Quebec have actually determined that ducking mortality is about 55 to 65%, probably influenced by conditions shortly after hatching in the weather. So in terms of the actual kind of diet for these guys, let's see if we can find an adult hanging around, adult male. He's having a sleep there, we'll let him have a sleep. In terms of their foraging and kind of diet, they feed mainly on benthic invertebrates. During the breeding period, they will form pairs or small groups and feed on a diverse range of freshwater invertebrates. However, they do feed on marine organisms the rest of the year, in flocks ranging from a few individuals to several thousand birds, with important foods being crustaceans, herring spawn, gastropods, small bivalves like mussels. In late winter and spring, they tend to shift their diets according to the relative prolificity of food, showing a level of opportunism. For example, they start feeding on seagrass beds or epifaunal crustaceans that increase in size over winter, or potentially Pacific herring eggs after they spawn. And as the prey landscape changes, these guys adjust by their foraging efforts and habitat selection. So effort is lowest in December due to the high prey abundance, and it increases until mid-February when prey declines. And this increases again in May, probably due to the increasing daylight for foraging. And as the season progresses, they will move to habitats with lower prey densities, instead staying in habitats spawn prey and increasing their foraging efforts. These guys usually captures its food underwater and consumes it whole. They've been actually observed to select smaller bivalves than those available, probably because of the energy cost of processing shell matter, and they seem to select slow-swimming epifaunal crustaceans. Surf scooters also consume smaller prey that are located in complex habitats such as mussel beds, and which makes them use more visual cues to their congruent or white-winged scooter. They actually visually light siphons found in informal bivalves to capture them, and gut analysis shows a strong ability to avoid ingesting vegetation while feeding on heron eggs, which is quite interesting. Flocks of these guys are able to dive in highly synchronous fashion, and the synchrony is actually correlated to their group size. Drive duration have many factors, such as prey type, density and prolificity, season, and water depth. These guys increase their dive duration when they are feeding on herons spawning, which is harder to capture than sessile bivalves. And adults will dive for crustaceans and mollusks, or the ducklings will live for a variety of marine freshwater invertebrates because they live in the wetlands. In terms of threats, there was a study on these sea ducks. Actually, parasites are actually important in mortality, so they have lots of different parasites, which is actually quite bad for them. Predation on the eggs as well has not been studied, but bald eagles, mustelids, and golden eagles have all been identified preying on these guys in marine habitats. And sometimes actually some have been shot and things like that. 2007 oil spill in San Francisco Harbor killed thousands of these birds, including many scooters, which is a big thing as well. But in terms of their status, they are considered least concerned by the IUCN because they have very large range and very large population size. The population has seemed to be decreasing, but the small decline is not rapid enough to consider it to be vulnerable, and it's estimated the population is between 250,000 and 1.3 million individuals. They seem to be doing quite well. But yeah, another really cool species. Thank you, Lorby, for making this one. A really cool sea duck. And we're going to have a look at another sea duck. This one was done by Monsoon this time. Monsoon, we know we like Monsoon. We've got the King Eider. A really, really cool species there. So let's have a look at these guys. The King Eider. See them hanging out there. Is there a couple babies in here? I'm pretty sure I released the babies in here. Oh, they didn't have any, I don't think. But that's alright, they're only small babies. It's a little bit annoying. Anyway. Oh, wait. There's the babies in here. Yes, they are in here. So let's quickly sort that out real quick. Okay, so yeah, we are back and, we got these guys. I had to fix them up again. I think I actually put in the other enclosure. But don't worry, we'll carry on. Anyway, so we've got the King Eider, or Stomateria spectabilis. So these guys are a large sea duck that breeds along the northern hemisphere coasts of northern Europe, North America, and Asia. And they spend most of their time in coastal marine ecosystems in high latitude, but migrate to the Arctic tundra to breed in June and July. So in terms of taxonomy, they were first described in 1758, and then the genus Anas, as we mentioned before. Then they were put in their own genus of Somonturna with other large species of eiders. And they've actually been known to hybridize with the common eider. So this species means kind of in its name, Stomateria means body, so kind of woolly body, as they have a famously thick, soft down. And Spectabilis means kind of snowy, remarkable, or worth seeing, as the handsomeness. So you can see they've got quite a nice plumage. And the King Eider is actually a direct translation of its Icelandic name. So it's called the King because of its orange crown-like knob on its bill that makes it look like, it's wearing kind of a royal robe, which is really interesting. In terms of its description, these guys are a large species of sea duck. They get about 50 to 70 centimeters, or about 20 to 28 inches in length, and have a wingspan of about 86 to 102 centimeters, or 34 to 40 inches. So males on average are heavier than females, with a mean weight about 1.6 kilograms, or about 3.6 pounds, and females are about 1.5 kilograms, or about 3.45 pounds for the females. An individual's mass can vary considerably, though. It can be as little as 2 pounds, or 0.9 kilograms, and as much as 2.2 kilos, or just under 5 pounds. And like most species of eider, they are sexually dimorphic. So you can see the males here are slightly larger, and in breeding plumage, they're much more colourful. The male is unmistakable, as it's mostly black body, blue tuft, white breast, and multicoloured head. So as you can see there, the cheek is pale green, and the bill is separated by a thin line and red on the white nail, and have a large distinctive knob on there as well. So you can see palish blue-grey, and then you can see that kind of green bit there, and that orange bit there, and that bill, which is interesting as well. And you can also see on the legs they have a bit of a spur that allows them, to fight, because they are defensive duckies. But yeah, that's quite cool. I like this one. And then we have a look at the female. As most things, the queen eider, they definitely have a warm brown colour. So very typical of most female ducks. They tend to be more type of brown, but still looks really beautiful. The females from under neck and flank are kind of in blackish chevrons. And with those on her neck being kind of like fine black streaks. She also has a buffy spot on the base of her bill, and like a blue-red eye, and you can see the kind of lighter bits on there. The juveniles, as correctly I should have said, I put wrong over here, you can see they're kind of greyish brown, and late in their first autumn they'll molt into a darker plumage, and it takes them about 3 years to reach the dark plumage if they're a male. So in terms of their habitat and range, they are what's called circumpolar. So they are found pretty much all across the poles throughout the Arctic. They breed on the Arctic coasts of Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Svalbard, and Russia, using a variety of tundra habitats. They winter in Arctic or subantarctic marine areas such as the Bering Sea, the west coast of Greenland, eastern Canada, and northern Norway. With wintering, birds can be in large flocks, and some flocks can exceed 100,000 birds. And they also occur annually on the northeastern United States, Scotland, and Carpathia Peninsula. So in terms of food or feeding, their foraging strategies will actually change depending on the season. For much of the year, when it's at sea, they will feed on benthic invertebrates, but during the breeding season, it does more of its foraging in freshwater lakes and ponds, where it dabbles, feeding on smaller vertebrates plucked from the water, and it feeds on mollusks, crustaceans like king crabs, or even on sea urchins, starfish, and sea anemones, so very much a generalist in that regard. In terms of breeding, they will also build a scrap nest on the ground, usually near water, and she lines it with vegetation and down from her own body, and she lays a clutches of from 2 to 7 eggs as well, and the young are typically raised collectively or by the females, and they incubate them for about 22 to 23 days. We'll have a look at these cute little babies here for a bit. In terms of their voice, the male song is a quivering dove-like cooing, which is interesting as well, and the female makes a variety of low clucks, grunts, and growls. And on longevity, they are quite lived. The oldest known king, Eider, was a female that lived at least 18 years, 11 months, and she was ringed or banded as an adult south of Alaska in 1940, and then was shot in 1958 in Alaska, Yugoslavia, Alaska. So she lived quite a long time. So that's the oldest we definitely know of them. We'll look at the male as we talk about their conservation status and things like that. So because of their large population and wide range, they are considered a species of least concern. They're doing quite common, and they're one of the species actually covered under the agreement of the conservation of African and Eurasian migratory water birds. And as young and eggs, they can be killed by many predators, such as common ravens, Paris the jaguar, Arctic fox, and gulls. And they actually were considered, in the Yolpik people, a regular source of meat as well. And they kind of were considered food as well. And they are considered food as well. But yeah, really, really cool. And I'm sorry about that with the babies. I guess I'll just cut that out. I cut that out of the video, so no worries. We're going to move on. So this is done by Monsoon. You know, everyone loves Monsoon. Always does a wonderful job. Next up, we have got the Cape Ground Squirrel. So this is a cool one. The Cape Ground Squirrel. So the Cape Ground Squirrel, or the South African Ground Squirrel, is found in Namibia, and also parts of South Africa through Botswana into Namibia. The name Cape Ground Squirrel is actually misleading, because they actually are found in quite a wide range. And the common name is actually arrived at to distinguish it from tree squirrels from Cape Town, and also known as the fan-tailed squirrel. So in terms of description, they have black skin with a coat made of short, stiff hairs without underfur. The fur is a cinnamon with black while the face and sides tend to be white. The sides of his body each have a white stripe, and the eyes are fairly large, and you can see have white lines around them. The Cape's ground squirrel's sexual dimorphism is subtle, with males typically weighing between 423 to 649 grams, or about just under a pound to, just 1.4 pounds, with the females being about 444 to 600 grams, or about 9.9 to 1.3 pounds. They also reach a total length of about 420 to 476 millimeters in males, so about 16 to 18 inches, while females are about 17.1 to 17.6 inches. So they tend to be a little bit smaller. I'm not going to talk about the belly and groin area on the female actually has, 2 pairs of teats, and they have a prominent baculum as well. And I'm not going to actually get into the other facts because it's quite interesting, but they do molt between August and September, and between March and April once per year. So they have a wide distribution. They are not just found on the Cape. They are widespread across southern Africa through Botswana, South Africa, Lesotho, and Namibia. The range covers most of Namibia, but they're absent from coastal regions into the northwest. And they also inhabit central and southwestern Kalahari in Botswana, and they can be found in central and north areas in South Africa. So in terms of their kind of behavior and ecology, they live mainly in arid and semi-arid areas. They prefer to live in veal and grasslands with hard ground, and they can be found in scrub along pans, along floodplains and agricultural areas. They are generally active during the day and do not hibernate, and they are burrowing animals that live in that dig and live in a cluster of burrows that are about 700 square meters, with 2 to 100 entrances. These burrows serve as protection from extreme temperatures at the surface as well as predators, nonetheless they spend most of the day feeding at the surface. They will shade their heads and backs with their bushy tails, which is often thought to be important for thermoregulation. However, research actually revealed that this tail raising does not actually decrease core body temperature, and it's certainly most of the way to save a way for the squirrel to cool their skin and increase their thermal comfort as they forage in the hot sun between the visits to their burrows. Burrowing is actually shown to reduce the squirrel's core body to a few degrees Celsius, by a few degrees Celsius, and they tend to burrow early in the morning in the summer to avoid the heat. And in winter months, their core body temperature increases rapidly upon exiting their burrows. And depth basing is also done. In terms of their kind of diet, these guys will feed on bulbs, fruits, grasses, herbs, insects, and shrubs, and they forage daily and do not hoard food. The Cape ground squirrel usually does not need to drink as it gets sufficient moisture from its food, and they spend about 70% of their time feeding, about 20% of their time being vigilant, and another 10% socializing. And they use the position of the sun as an orientation marker to hide and recover their food. The burrows of Cape ground squirrels are also used by meerkats and yellow mongoose. While Cape ground squirrels and meerkats appear to have a mutual relationship, mongooses and squirrel relations tend to be more commensal. Predators of these guys can include jackals, snakes, and monitor lizards. They're actually able to sense the difference in the droppings of predators and non-predators, and when threatened, they will kind of engage in mobbing behavior, with several squirrels rushing upon the predator to use their tails to block it. And when the predator strikes back, the squirrels back off. However, multiple mobbings have been used to drive away predators. So in terms of their social behavior, they live in groups of about 2 to 3 adult females maximum, and 9 subadults of either sex, as well as females-dependent offspring. So groups with more than 3 females will split into smaller groups. Adult males live separately from females and only join when females are in estrus. Male groups number up to 19 unrelated individuals, which are not agnostic. And within a males group, 4 or 5 males may form temporary subgroups to change size of members every day, with female groups living in separate burrow clusters. A female's group range could be about group's home range could be about 4 hectares, with a core area of about 0.25 hectares. But these home ranges can overlap. But these core areas are really defended with antagonistic behavior. Male groups live in home ranges that envelop several females. It can be about 12 hectares or about 30 acres. And with the female group, within the female group, there's no dominance hierarchy, and members use the same feeding and sleeping ranges, with males living in age-based linear hierarchies. So typically the oldest one is, the best and the top dog. Unlike female groups, though, the male groups are not territorial, and membership is very open. During estrus, though, a female will be approached, solicited, and chased by males trying to mate with her, and the most dominant male gets the first matings. A female will mate with the same male many times, and if a male is not yet mated with a female, he will disrupt the copulations he has with other males. However, mate guarding is actually considered quite rare. In terms of communication, though, when perceives something as a threat, they'll use like a whistle-like call to scare them away. They have kind of short shrills to kind of get rid of them, and a medium pitch and a lower pitch one. During antagonistic encounters, though, they will emit deep growls as a sign of aggression. And juvenile squirrels make play calls and chirp and things like that, which is quite cute. This is actually a baby. I want to have a look at a juvenile. Have we got any juveniles? I should have. Yeah. Awareness and birth is off. Let's see if we can find a... We'll have to find one. There should be one in here. Elderly, an adult. Gotta be a baby in here. I mean, even if they are young adults, and they're really not that different though. Anyway, we'll carry on. Campground squirrels mate and reproduce year-round, but mating mostly occurs in the dry winter months. Since females will copulate with multiple males, the males' large testes are used for sperm competition. And after oh, I'm not going to even say that one. In one groups, only one female at the time will enter estrus, which lasts about 3 hours. Gestation lasts about 48 to, or about 42 to 49 days, with lactation actually finishing or begins not long after the pups are born. A lactating female will then isolate herself in her own burrow, then care for the young, but she returns to the group after they've weaned or if she lost the litter. There's typically 1 to 3 pups per litter, and they are born artificial, so they're pretty much born, almost like helpless. They're born blind and hairless. The pups will stay in the burrow for the first 45 days of their life, and by 35 days their eyes are open, and 7 days after emerging from their burrows, they can eat solid food. And lactation will end at about 52 days. Males then reach sexual maturity about 8 months, while females take about 10 months, and the former will leave their native group while the latter remains. So typically the boys go off and do their own thing. So in terms of their status, the Cape ground squirrel actually does not seem to be affected or threatened overall, though in some areas they are considered an agricultural pest. In addition, humans have used the poisonous grass to control them due to crop damage and rabies. They do inhabit protected areas as well, such as the Scoter National Park and the Trans-Frontier Park in Botswana. So they are actually found in quite good numbers around the place, which is good. Yeah, these are the Cape ground squirrel, and that was done by a new modder. This is actually a new modder called by Concord Forge, I believe that's correct. So yeah, new modder on the scene. This is one of their first mods. Really cool to see some new modders and some cool new species. So really, really awesome. I'm actually going to check if these babies are still here, because they should be. Yeah, they're still juveniles. Okay, I was just thinking there was something wrong, but I think I might have just not had it fast enough. Anyway. So next up, we have got an extinct species done by Great Cakes. Always love a Great Cakes mod. So we've got here Leptictidium, which is another cool species. If you guys have seen Walking with Beasts, these guys will be very recognizable. So Leptictidium is an extinct genus of small mammal that was likely bipedal. They comprise about 8 species. The species we'll talk about in particular when we get into it. They are especially interesting as they have a bunch of characteristics that are similar to basal eutherians, but have highly specialized adaptations such as long legs and a long tail, which help in locomotion. So in terms of they're a very special animal because they have lots of primitive anatomy, but have high specialization in their legs and things like that, almost similar to like a kangaroo, things like that. In terms of their diet, they were omnivores, and they ate both combination of insects, lizards, frogs, and small mammals. And they are not placentals, but they are considered non-placental eutherians, even though they're closely related to placental eutherians. And they lived around the lower Eocene, a time about like 50 to 35 million years ago, when the time was like very humid and warm. And then, although they were widespread throughout Europe, they went extinct about 35 million years ago with no descendants, as they were adapted to forest environments, and most of the habitats was already converted to open plains by the Oligocene as the world kind of dried a bit. They mentioned a very special animal as well. They varied from about 60 to 90 centimeters in length, or 24 to 35 inches, which more half of it being tail, depending on the species. The largest known specimen was about 20-inch long tail, so it depends on the species as well. But what's really interesting is their locomotion. So one of the mysteries was how it moved, and they're one of the very few completely bipedal mammals, and it was difficult to find a living analog to actually compare it to. And if kangaroo was used, it's possible that they kind of hopped with their body tilted forward, but other ways, elephant shrews combine that kind of locomotion, and they can run on 2 legs to be fleed from predators. Studies on the bones have yet to give conclusive information, but the limbs seem too weak to actually have jumps, but its long feet were obviously adapted for jumping rather than running. So it's kind of whether they jump or ran, we actually don't really know, or maybe they were just kind of bobbed along, They think they hopped, but it might not have hopped like that. Kenneth D. Rose compared the species Leptictidium nasium to the species like the Leptidus decotus. and that is had a series of traits to show it was a running animal that sometimes jumped, because of the similarities there, which is quite interesting. But yeah, we'll carry on. In terms of behaviour, they've actually found 3 different species of Leptictidium within the messel pits, and the marks on the fur have actually been preserved, as well as their stomach contents that reveal that we're omnivore. And these kind of patterns are actually based on real fossils, and so they kind of know that's what they look like, which is really cool. In terms of its habitat, these guys are from the European subtropical forests of the Eocene. So from the beginning of this period, the temperatures of the planet rose the quickest it's ever had, in part of the Paleo-Eogene thermal maximum, which actually the world got 7 degrees hotter in less than 100,000 years, which is only being matched by climate change today, but that's a big topic later. And this caused a great extinction, which was used to distinguish the Eocene fauna from that the Paleogene. The global climate of the Eocene was probably the most homogeneous in the Cenozoic, with temperature gradient from the equator to the poles was actually half of that today, and the deep ocean currents were especially warm. The polar regions were also much warmer, possibly as warm as the present-day Pacific Northwest of North America, with temperate forests reaching to the poles, while rainy tropical climates reached about 45 degrees north. The greatest temperature, however, was that the climate of the tropics is probably similar to today's, so it's very interesting as well. In the Eocene, most of what was Europe, the Mediterranean, and Southwest Asian was actually submerged by the Tethys Sea. The continents were separated by the Tyrrhenian Strait, and due to the high humidity and temperatures, most of the European continent was covered in vegetation. And the region where the species was found, Germany, was volcanically active at the time. And during the Eocene, it was thought that a messel pit would have been an old location for a volcanic lake, which was saturated in CO2, or carbon dioxide. This lake would periodically release its gas it contained and create a lethal cloud that would asphyxiate any animal in its path. And this would explain the great number of non-aquatic species being found in the lake bed. So that's quite interesting as well. In the lush forest of this region, there were lots of different really cool animals, such as Hyenodontia, Pholodocurus, Paleotinus, and Popaleotherium. Also predators such as the crocodilian, Asiastosuchus, the Hyenodont, the Smilodon, and the messel giant ant. So if you've seen Walking with Beasts, you know about that one. So this species in particular, this species is Leptictidium anabricinae, which was found in 1962, based on a series of lower jaws from the lutein faunal stage. They also uncovered a small skeleton and described as the paratype of the species, but Storch and Lester actually found in 1998 the species don't even belong to the genus Leptictidium. So this may change things, but this is actually Leptictidium now, and this is considered a type species. It was also the smallest species of all, and it was only about 60 centimeters long, with several different specimens being found in the messel pit. Let's actually have a look at the little babies, really chance, because they look very cute. Oh no, that's not good. Let's have a look at the baby. Many different specimens, as I mentioned, have been found in the messel pit. And Marx actually remarks on the exceptional development of the mesocarp premolar, which was actually their molars were actually quite small and compared to their dentition as a whole. And the name suggests the name of the species actually refers to the Roman settlement of Imberia. And there's a few other species, there's some found in France. Some of the species are a little bit bigger, found in different places. Comparison to messel species, 67, some are a bit smaller, but yeah, quite cool. Evolutionary tendencies, there's actually been some really look into it. Look at species, well, they often got bigger as well, and some other things that happen to that. These guys are quite small. But yeah, really, really cool. Another really cool species done by Great Cakes Mod. It's always a winner, and how can you not love Leptictidium? If you're a Walking with Beasts fan, you'll love these guys, as they were featured in the first episode, and definitely a very cool one. But yeah, you got this next one done by Fluke Boy 1/3, I think third, I think it was. But we'll just call it a Fluke Boy. So this is done by Fluke Boy. This is not actually a different species. This is a hybrid, a naturally occurring hybrid that I thought was definitely worth talking about. We have got here the growler bear or the Pizzly bear. So they've got different names, but this is a hybrid of a polar bear and a grizzly bear, also known as the growler bear, Pizzly bear, zebra bear, the grizzly, and the nanolook. So these guys are a species, are a rare. I was going to say species, but they're not a species. These guys are a rare hybrid that occurs both in captivity and the wild. So, in 2006, the occurrence of the hybrid in nature was actually confirmed by testing the DNA that was found a unique-looking bear that had been shot near Sharks Harbour in Northwestern Territories on Bank Islands in the Canadian Arctic. And the number of confirmed hybrids have since risen to 8, all of them descending from the same female polar bear. So this is definitely a polar bear that likes, likes those male brown bears. Maybe likes to hop the fence a bit, which is quite funny. So possible wild-bred polar bear, grizzly bear hybrids have been reported and shot in the past, but DNA tests were not able to verify. But genetic analysis actually shows that there was a number of instances of integration between polar bear species, including integration of polar bears and brown bears during the Pleistocene. So the grizzly bear is the local name for Ursus arctos refers brown bear, whether they're used internationally. So if you're looking at a brown bear and things like that, the kind of grizzly bear is just the American name for brown bear. So occurrences in the wild. So while there have been several suspected sightings and 8 confirmed cases, theories of how these hybrids might naturally occur is more hypothetical. Although they are sister species, so polar bears and grizzly bears are considered closely related, or sisters, we suppose, they're each other's closest relative. Direct contact has not been the norm because polar bears hunt and breed and sometimes even make dens on sea ice, so they're out in the ocean, while brown bears live on the forests and live on terrestrial places, so that polar bears are more marine. Scientists have actually been able to give an exact explanation for the phenomenon. One theory suggests that the grizzly bear population increases. Male bears leave their dens sooner while females stay with their cubs. This means that male grizzlies for female polar bears may become viable mates. This is main speculation reason the fact that hybrids have reported to have grizzly bear fathers and polar bear mothers. So that's kind of what it seems. That may be an explanation. Scientists have also hypothesized that this is actually due to climate change. So as winters become shorter, grizzly bears become to move more frequently, expanding their territory, and they expand into areas where they'll change what they're eating. And with lack of berries, salmon, and natural vegetation in the Arctic, grizzlies have been hunting seals. That brings them into contact with polar bears, and then they actually start breeding with each other. So that's kind of another hypothesis there. So there has been discoveries. So as mentioned, there was a hunter in Idaho that shot one in 2006. His name was Jim Martell. Had been hunting for polar bears and killed an animal believing it was a normal polar bear. But then he took interest as he saw it had a thick, creamy white fur typical of polar bears, but had long claws, the hunchbacked, a shallow face, and brown patches around its eyes as well, which are all traits of grizzly bears, which is interesting as well. The DNA test actually confirmed that it was a hybrid with a polar bear mother and a grizzly bear father in the first documented case in the wild, as it thought that it was biologically possible, as there had been bred, grizzly bears and things like that had been bred in captivity in the past, but this was definitely a wild individual, which is quite interesting. And there have been some subsequent discoveries. So individuals had been found in islands as well. In one in 2010, David Kupta, who was a hunter, actually found one as well. He shot a bear. They thought it was a polar bear. Then after inspecting it, it was discovered that the bear's mother was a grizzly polar hybrid and the father was a grizzly bear. So that's interesting. So it's getting a little bit more grizzly bear. So there's actually a picture of one here, but you can see it looks a lot more it looks pretty much just like a white brown bear with kind of big brown socks on, kind of things like that. So it's starting to, because as mentioned, it is. Its mother was a hybrid, and then it had a grizzly dad, so it's becoming more and more grizzly. And since 2012-2014, another 6 hybrids were reported, and samples were collected of genetics and suggest they all were hybrids. The 8 hybrids identified to date were 4 first generations and 4 grizzly bear backcross individuals, with a single F1 with the mother of 4 of the backcross individuals, and a single female. So there may be one female that was very interested in that female bear. In the males, seems to have liked the brown bears over her own kind, and thus the grandmother of all 4 backcross bears. The 2 male grizzlies mated with the female polar bear and gave rise to the 4 F1s, and 1 grizzly bear apparently mated with the polar bear in 2 different years. So that's quite interesting. So it shows that you should quite like them. There's also the Avrat bear. So there was a bear shot in Avrat in the western shore of the Hudson Bay. It was a hybrid, with news agencies saying this was potentially of climate change, with the bear light in colour, but blonde grizzly bears have been reported before. and it actually was shown it wasn't a Pizzly bear. This was a pure brown bear that just had, you know, kind of a lighter colour, which was interesting as well. In terms of its range expansion, it's currently unknown why grizzly bears are found in the habitats of polar bears. They suggest, as I mentioned, climate change could be driving polar bears more onto land more, and then polar bears maybe going more north as the climate wins and they start finding more food out in the tundra and forests. So it could be both of those things as well. There's also evidence of ancient hybridization. So the fact that these ancient relationships of hybrid bears go back as early 1990s, but there is evidence of having gene flows since the Pleistocene. So potentially, during ebbs and flows of interglacials, the bears would have made contact and bred, and then on and off and on and off throughout those interglacials, which is quite interesting. In terms of naming, they actually came up with a few names as mentioned, Pizzly bear, Growler bear, the Prolisley, things like that. So often they take the sire's name first. So if it's a male first, that's why I have Liger. So the lion is the dad, the tiger is the mum. So usually the dad goes first. So the Pizzly bear or Growler bear is kind of the offspring of a male polar bear and a female grizzly would be a Pizzly bear, while the offspring of a male grizzly and a female polar bear is called a Growler bear. So most of these would be Growler bears, not Pizzlies or Pizzly bear. So it kind of depends. It doesn't really matter too much, but the naming convention depends on who's the father. So the father's always first. And there have been some captive hybrids, so there have been some produced in zoos that have traits that are kind of in between grizzly bears and polar bears. For example, their bodies are smaller than polar bears but larger than grizzlies, with flat heads fall between the broader grizzly head and the leaner polar bear head. So they're kind of very much in between those guys. And similarly, the hair of the hybrids have the baldness, hollowness as well, which blend the traits of polar bears and grizzlies. So they have pretty much just a mix of traits. The hybrids as well actually demonstrate behaviors more similar to polar bears or grizzlies. They stump toys more like polar bears. They would hunt seals, so they may be able to better survive that way as well. So that's quite interesting. So yeah, we know a little bit about these hybrid bears. Very, very cool. And we'll have a look at the baby, because let's have a look at the baby hybrids. So it looks really, really cool. Be interesting to see how that's come round. Definitely very cool. But anyway, last but certainly not least, we've got another Great Cakes mod coming in. So we're going to have a look all the way over here. So here we have got, this is a cool species as well. This is Megistitherium. So these guys are a species of Hyenodont. So let's have a look at these guys. I've missed the big boy here. So Megistitherium is an extinct genus of Hyenodont that belongs to the family Hyenodontidae, which lived in Africa and potentially in Asia. It first evolved in the early Miocene into the late Miocene and lived between 22 to 12 million years ago and existed for about 10 million years. So its name comes from ancient Greek, which means greatest beast, so basically the greatest beast. And the name of the species, Megistitherium ornitholastes, comes from bone, which is ornistion, and then thalatos means crushed or brushed, so basically the bone crusher. Its family is actually quite a diverse group of hyenodont predators, so it's kind of the biggest in its long line of really interesting and diverse predators. They lived during the Eocene and became possibly ecologically displaced by the carnivorans, so more typical cats and dogs and bears and things during the late Oligocene. So these guys emerged in the Miocene towards the end of their hyenodonts flourishing, and it was part of the radiation of African hyenodonts that occurred at the time. And there's another species called Hyenorolis stolezi, which may be this closely related to these guys, and similar in size and structure and things like that. So they actually suggest that Megistitherium may actually be a junior synonym and of this species, which is actually known from a complete skeleton and other remains that have been found in Europe, Asia, and Namibia. So they could be the same thing. But either way, just a name change. Still really cool. So these guys, that's the only known species in their genus. And they're a large hyenaloid from the early to middle Miocene. Its remains have been found in Ngorongoro and the remote formations in Kenya, Egypt, Namibia, Uganda, and Libya. And it was named by Robert Savage in 1973. These guys are one of the largest known hyenodonts and actually considered one of the largest known carnivores, mammalian carnivores to ever live. And like other hyenodonts, it had an enormous skull relative to its body, about 66 centimeters, or about 2 feet long. It also had a body mass estimates of about 500 kilograms, or half ton. are about 1,100 pounds, and the canal-sealed teeth, like Medusotherium, like other Hyenodonts, was actually the upper first molar, and overlapped with the lower molar components like scissors to have quite a formidable, powerful shearing action. So in terms of paleoecology, this species lives in the Sahara Desert, and what was is the Sahara Desert. It was much more fertile at the time, so there was lots of grassland and rain was plentiful. Lakes and ponds provided water for large fauna, which provided these guys with ample prey. So large hyenodonts like these guys were actually could have originally evolved to be specialist predators or scavengers of large African herbivores. And Gomphothere bones have been found with these fossils that actually suggest they may have eaten things like Gomphotheres, which were not necessarily as big as modern elephants, but they were kind of bovid size, kind of like the size of a big cow or buffalo or bison, things like that. So we think Gomphotheres, they weren't quite, most of them didn't get quite as big as modern elephants, but they were smaller and probably more likely prey for these guys. The extinction of this species, though, of Medusotherium and other hyenodonts, was thought to have correlated with the increasing aridity of Africa, and as they were more adapted to actually forest environments. The youngest known remains come from the late Miocene, about 12 million years ago. But yeah, there's actually some debate as well as whether these groups, hyenodonts, may actually be paraphyletic. So they may have actually, some of them may be related to, Afrotheres as well. That's all quite interesting. So it's not a lot of evidence to really suggest that in these more kind of papers, but there is some papers talking about that at the moment and looking at different relationships and things, which is quite cool. And I say there's no evidence, but there is plenty of evidence to suggest that as well. They backed it up in a paper, so should be all good. But yeah, really, really cool. Really do love these guys. And you can see the cute little babies here. I like the babies because they just got the adult face on like a little body. But yeah, really, really cool mod. I really am a big fan. But yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So I'm going to thank everyone. Thank you Tosco DS. Thank you Lorby. Thank you Monsoon. Thank you Concord Forge. Thank you Great Cakes, and thank you Fluke Boy. You've all done a wonderful job with all your mods. So I think this would be a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to get the bell icons to get notified about anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.